to all the sisters from Asia. You're welcome to this webinar. Before we start the webinar, my name is Adija Adamu and I will be your moderator for this session. I will take you through the platform on the interpretation. Remember, this webinar is having 3 languages. You have the Nepali, the Bahasa, and the Karmia language. So you can go to the globe icon below, you choose your language, and then you mute the original. I will repeat again, go to the globe icon, click your language, and then you mute the original. Once more, thank you again. We will start the opening session with a spiritual ceremony. This is a traditional female custom that we start webinars with, please. I will call Yaso Kanti Bachatan. She's from Asia too. We'll give her 5 minutes to do all the spiritual opening. Yaso, can you go ahead?
Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are joining this webinar from all the indigenous brothers and sisters. I am Yasokanti Bhattachan from Nepal and I belong to Thakali nation. My ancestral homeland is in Maitang near the Tibetan border, and now I am going to do my Thakali traditional prayer. And please, all of you, join hands like me and remember your ancestor, God, and great spirit. First of all, I will speak in my mother tongue, and later I will translate in English. La nari choba, la langba nurbu, la chiring galmo, tangla sinki korpo, awa ranjung. La nyae momkhe, nyae pitri za, yomje jam, ni jari, asis nango, ni sansare adivasi za, mrin za, ale pichang za, momkhe za, yomdi jam, asis nango, la ni आदिवासी जाए विश्व आदिवासी जाए न्याय क्यों न्याय न्याय हम न्याय क्या हम जम न्याय सो हम जम न्याय लप्त खेप जाजे किन्सिमु जलवायु परिवर्तन जे लवजे न्याय क्या जा तिम जा न्याय हारे न्याय न्याय क्या जा न्याय हारे न्याय कई जा न्याय हारे चतसी चु पेन्डेमिक के बेलरी नमदेजम दुख धन यांसिमु चतसी नि हमरी जम ल झाजे न्याय पितृ झाजे न्याय ल झाजे नि हमरी जम आशिष नांगो न्याय नि जाए अधिकार मानव अधिकार सामूहिक अधिकार बचोलवरी नि झारी आशिष नांगो नि झा चतसी नि हमजी संसारी आदिवासी झा झाजे आशिष नांगो झारी आशिष नांगो किसी नि झाजे प्रार्थना लसिमु. Now I want to offer a water to our God ancestor and great spirit, and this is a homemade rice beer which we offer to our ancestor, God and great spirit, and this is a homemade liquor which we need every day in our ritual from birth, death, after the death and marriage ceremony. And this is a milk. In our ancestral homeland, we get yak milk. So we offer to our ancestor. And this is a juniper leaves. So we need this also for every our ritual. And we light an incense of a juniper for our God, ancestor, and our great spirit. And also now I am going to say the prayer in English. Our God, our God, Norichewa, Langba Nurbu, Chiringalmo, Kangla Sinki Korpo, Hawa Ranjung. Please give us, bless us, and our ancestor and great spirit. Give us a blessing to all the indigenous brothers and sisters around the world. We are in the danger of losing our tradition, culture, land, territories, and resources due to the development aggression and by the government and development partners. So please God, give us strength, courage, and power to fight all the problems which exist around this world and which we all indigenous peoples, women and girls are facing around the world. So because of Mother Earth also getting very sick, so we want Mother Earth to heal. And we all need to love and respect Mother Earth. And during this pandemic period and during the climate change effect to the indigenous people, traditional homeland, we are refugee in our own land and we are bonded labor in our own land. So please God, during this time, give strength to all the indigenous brothers and sisters and girls around the world so we can ensure our human right and collective right. Thank you. Varche.
Thank you, Sister Yasi, for the spiritual ceremony and for calling on the Almighty and the Mother Earth to guide us through this session. I will now move on. Once more, thank you for those who are joining now. And we will move on to what is the aim of our webinar. As you all know, this webinar is the AYNI LFS Leading from the South, webinar, which is an information webinar. The main aim is to highlight what is FIMI and the AYNI Fund and to give you information about the Leading from the South grant, what you need to know about the application, the submission, and also to call on all the indigenous women to apply for this funding. I will now give the floor to our sister, Margarita. She's our indigenous sister from Nicaragua, and she's from the Miskitu indigenous people of Nicaragua. Please, Margarita, do us an opening remark on behalf of FIMI.
Thank you very much, Adija. Sisters, thank you very much for coming to attend this webinar. The aim is to learn about this call that is now open. But for us, it is also a big opportunity to share and learn together of what are our priorities, what we do, and we also together learn more about FIMI. For all women around the world, Beijing is very famous. Beijing is famous because in 1995, when the 4th World Conference of Women happened, for us as indigenous women, that was also a very first time that a group of sisters from Asia, Africa, the Arctic, the Americas get together, and there was a language issue, but we start talking among ourselves. And because that gathering, a couple of years later, FIMI was created. Now, this year, FIMI is 21 years old, and it has been understood and operate as a mechanism that bring together Indigenous women organizations from the different regions of the world. What it is we do. For us, understanding this opportunity to link strength together, to build capacities, to strengthen our leadership, and most of all, promote the individual and collective rights of Indigenous women. As human beings, we are all owners of individual rights, but as nation, as Indigenous people, we have collective rights, like Yaso just said, our territory, our land, our resources, our culture, our traditions. And that is what we are working to strengthen, to keep, to promote, as it is the root of our identity. While today we want to really focus on what the AYNI Fund does and what this Leading from the South call is about, we also want to remind that FEMI has another programs where you can get involved, where you can get where you can engage as Indigenous women and as Indigenous women organizations. We have this strategic program for political participation and advocacy. We have a research program that also focuses on relevant issues for Indigenous women. And there is also the training program that develop every year this global leadership school. So there are various ways in getting linked to FEMI, in taking part of what FEMI does. And I just want to remind you that there is an open call for the second World Conference of Indigenous Women that is led by FEMI in alliance with Indigenous women networks around the globe and with our allies that are there. So while we appreciate and we are grateful for you coming to be part of this webinar, we also just want to highlight that we rely on this partnership, we rely on this collaborative effort, we rely on this collective way of moving forward, of doing and building our agendas and priorities. That being said, thank you very much for your time. And we hope at the end of this webinar, we all have a better understanding of how this call fitting becomes the collective effort that FEMI is to us. Thank you very much, Aditya.
Thank you, Margarita, for giving us an insight into what is FEMI. And by the way, Margarita is the coordinator of FEMI AYNI Fund. I will now move to our sister, Sushila. She is a Morga from Nepal, and she is the monitoring and evaluation officer of the FEMI AYNI Fund, and she will be doing a presentation for us on what the call is all about. Over to you, Sister Sushila.
Thank you, Adija. And thank you all of you across the Asia and the Pacific for joining this webinar. I am very happy. Can we move to first slide, please? Yes. Yeah, thank you. So I am very happy to see you all again, who we are together in this movement of Indigenous peoples, particularly Indigenous women, for a very long time. I feel very great to connect with other new guardian of the earth and caretaker of the natures. And I hope this connection will turn into collectivity for advancing our rights. Let me take an opportunity to introduce very briefly about myself, as Adija already mentioned. So I am Sushila Thapa Magar from Nepal. Magar indigenous women. Yeah, I am with FEMI with the capacity of AYNI monitoring, evaluation, and learning coordinator. So today I am here with you all to share key highlights of the call that FEMI has launched on 23rd June as a AYNI LFS second call for proposal. Before entering to describe the highlights of this call, I want to point out few things. Please remain on mute. I mean, it is already on mute. If there are any queries, then you will be provided a forum and our team who is handling the, this Zoom platform will unmute you for asking your questions or making any comments. I have received so many queries through the chat, for unmuting. So sorry, it seems like video is disabled for now to ensure that the internet will be, stable, or we can have this webinar, smoothly. Second, if you have any queries or comment during the session and would like to request you to write to us, please drop your queries and comment in the chat box or question and answer box. We will be reviewing those chat box and comments in question answer box while we will have our discussion at the end of the session. If there will be any technical problems happen unexpectedly, please remain connected or log in again if in case you are disconnected for any other reasons. So I thank our interpreter, Mane, for Khmer. Though it is not there, I think they are coordinating through the WhatsApp, as you know, it is difficult to handle there. So Mane for Khmer, Tunga Bhadurai for Nepali, and Tess for Bhasha Indonesian. So as you know, you already explained, there is a globe at the end, so you can select your language for interpretation. And I happen to speak very fast. If I am too fast, especially for interpreters and our participant, please give me some signal to slow down. Thank you. Okay, let me walk through the coverage that I will be having in this presentation. We will start introducing AYNI as FEMI introduced by our sister Margarita. And then we will follow by the eligibility criteria and then priority areas of this call. Then we will discuss about the reference documents related to this call and also the mandatory documents which need to be submitted. We will talk shortly about the submission process and timeline, and will focus on the geographical area and the different grants window and their attributions. After presentation, we will have our sister Carmen to share about the budgetary part. And at the end of the session, we will have open forum for question and answer, and you will have, in between, if you have any queries, we request you to write down in the chat box or Q&A box. So, as already, Margarita explained about the FEMI, I will skip that and I will be going into the AYNI introduction directly. Indigenous Women Fund, AYNI Fund, is one of the key strategic programs and a philanthropic arm of FEMI. AYNI is a Quechua word that means collaboration, diversity, equality, and justice from Indigenous worldview. AYNI has 3 grand strategies, as you can see in the slide. It is Seed Upscaling Project, or Scaling Up Project first. Second is Indigenous People Assistance Facility, that is EPAF. And third one, as Adija mentioned, is Leading from the South LFS program. And this LFS program is a continuation of a special fund created in 2016 to provide resources to promote gender equality, and women rights in the global south. And it is funded by Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. And this fund is jointly implemented by Women Funds in different regions, and AYNI Fund from FIMI is a global approach working across the globe, but in prioritized countries, especially for Indigenous women and managed by Indigenous women. Thank you. And then next slide, please. Let me walk through the eligibility criteria of this fund. This first is the type of organization we will fund is Indigenous Women's Organization or Indigenous Women's Network, or an Indigenous Peoples Organization, which is led by Indigenous women. Let me clarify who are Indigenous women-led organizations. Organization having 50% of Indigenous women in the decision-making body. That can be board of directors, executive councils, or any other terms used in your local context are the decision-making body, and have 50% of Indigenous women in executive staff of eligible countries. So one is that's why we are focusing on Indigenous women organization or Indigenous women-led organization. And this organization has to be legally registered in accordance with our traditional rule or your traditional rule in your or in your community, or can be current, registered with the current legislation of your countries. And it is necessary to have a bank account. Of course, we know that not all of our Indigenous women organization or network are registered. So we have solution to that too. So if you are not registered, so those organization or network must have an agreement letter with an legally registered organization as a physical sponsor. So the organization who agree to be physical sponsor has to be registered organization and must have bank account. So one more thing to add here is one organization can only can apply once. Only one project submission is allowed. So of course, there are some area where we have we will say they are not eligible to apply for this fund. Let me take to those things which make us ineligible for this fund is organization not led or managed by Indigenous women, non-Indigenous organization, political parties, and individuals are not eligible to apply. Similarly, submitting the proposal within the stipulated time is very, very important. If you miss the deadline, that means submission after the deadline or incomplete application will be ineligible. So another ineligibility is non-submission of the organizational document. I will come back to this non-submission of the organizational document things later. Next slide, please. So there are, as already discussed, some of the very important aspect of Indigenous people, particularly for Indigenous women, which we already mentioned. There are particularly priority areas for this call. So there are 7 prioritized areas for this call. Let me take you through. One is institutional strengthening. Second is land, territory, and third one is mitigation and adaptation to climate change. Fourth is advocacy and political power. Fifth one is prevention and elimination of all form of violence to the Indigenous people and to Indigenous women. And economic empowerment strengthening is another one. However, within these 7 priority areas, there are different subtopics included, which is mentioned in the implementation guideline. If you have any questions on this presented priority areas, we will discuss in a question answer session. Next slide, please. Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 important documents which are reference documents related to this call. One is implementation guide. Second one is frequently asked question. And third one is initial proposal template. You can find these 3 reference documents in our platform. We will be sharing the link to you again in the chat box later. So the implementation guide aims to support our organization and Indigenous women-led organization or network to organize the application, and it provides information on selection process, timeline, and so on of this grant cycle. It also guides FEMI to organize and systematize the call for this FEMI-AYNI fund. This implementation guide comprises of 7 sections, which includes the things we are presenting here, which is thematic priorities, geographical coverage, grant size and period, submission and selection process, eligibility and evaluation criteria, grant management, and timeline. So it has 7 sections. Second reference document is frequently asked questions. So frequently asked questions covers the area which needs to be clarified based on past experience of AYNI, and it will take you through some of the area which you might need more clarification. So third one, the initial proposal template is a standard format for AYNI call to be used to submit your application. It has 4 sections. Section 1 will be the organizational information, where you provide us your organizational information. Second is the technical information about the project you would like to do in partnership with FEMI. And third section will be the checklist, where I will come to this again. And fourth section is what you must submit while you submit the application. So you must complete section 1 and 2, where asterisk is there. So whereas in section 3, it is only that you need to tick the box confirming that if you are selected for next step, you will be able to provide those checked document. And you must tick the section in section 3 as required. And section 4 are the checklists to ensure that the mandatory documents are submitted. That is the checklist. As mentioned right now, there are 2 important documents to be submitted. Here in the first one is completed initial proposal, and second one is reference letter. If you submit the initial proposal template without completing the section, which especially the mandatory section, which is marked by asterisk there, or non-submission of the reference letter or reference letter without meeting the clear requirement criteria, will lead an application towards ineligibility. So we request you to check once again, confirm that you submit the required documents with completed sections. Yeah, so let me take through the submission process. You can submit the proposals in 3 options. First is through sending an email. Second is through uploading in the platform. And third one is online application. If you are applying for a large grant up to 200,000 USD, you must apply on. Have only one option, that is applying online. And if you are applying for medium grant up to 85,000 USD, you can upload the completed initial proposal and the reference letter, or you can use apply online option 2. You have to option for this if you are applying for medium grant. And if your application is small, then you can send it through emails. But you can use like other 2 options too, sending through the email or uploading or applying online. So small grant can use any of the 3 options. However, we strongly recommend you all for submitting the application online for 2 reasons. To be able to submit faster, and it will also enable us to reach you back faster. So let me take you through the grant cycle timeline. Next slide, please. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, the call has been open from 23rd July, and the deadline for the submission is 21st July 2021, midnight Peru time zone. And the communication of the final selection of the initial proposal will be on 19th August 2021. However, let me add, if you have any queries even after this webinar, you can write us through the email which is there in the platform, and we will display it later till 16 July 2021. And we will share the email in the chat box again at the end, and we will be responding your queries no later than 19 July 2021. Next slide, please. Actually, FIMI works across the globe in terms of geographical coverage, but for particularly in AYNI LFS call, we cover 5 regions, namely Africa, Latin America, Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific. So today we are focusing more on Asia. So within Asia, we cover 17 countries, which is Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Maldives, Mongolia, Burma, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam. There are queries why we are not covering beyond these countries in Asia, also in the Pacific, other than like Micronesia, Vanuatu, and Papua New Guinea, because of the compliances or the mandatory the agreement we had with Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dutch government. We are focusing on only these countries in this call. But of course, we are very happy to reach you out in other collaborations with FIMI. So these are the countries we are covering from Asia and the Pacific. Next slide, please. So let me take you through the grant size. Though I briefly mentioned about the grant size earlier. So 3 grant windows in this call. One is small grant, second one is medium grant, and third one is large grants. In small grants, you can apply up to 25,000 USD for the period of 18 months. And it is intended for the community project, especially focusing on the grassroots level. The medium-sized grants are applicable for up to 85,000 USD for 24 months, and it targets for national and sub-national coverage. Third grant is large-sized grants, which is applicable for up to 200,000 USD for 24 months, targeting to sub-regional and regional coverage. Let me reiterate, just to make sure that small grants can apply with any submission option we discussed earlier. Medium grants can apply online or can have uploading option. And the large size grant can only apply through online submission. Please, we request you to use online option possible extent with all the grant or any grant size you are applying for. At the end, let me reiterate the key important things once again. Next slide, please. If you have any queries, as I mentioned earlier, please do not hesitate to write to us with this email, lfs.ayni@iiwf.org till 16 July, and we will be responding you back no later than 19 July. This call is only for Indigenous women organization and networks or Indigenous people's organization led by Indigenous women, where Indigenous women occupies 50% of decision-making bodies and executive staff. We suggest you to make online application if possible. And I must re-emphasize again, please read the mentioned reference document carefully before developing or during developing your proposal. And please make sure that required sections in the application and questions are filled in before submitting the proposal. And please check whether the reference letter is addressing the things which has been there to be addressed in the reference letter. Thank you all again for remaining with me through the presentation. Thank you. So I Adija, over to you.
Thank you, Sister Sushila, for giving us the insight into what this call is all about, what is the application processes, the submission, and the emails to inquire about everything that we need to know about the call. I will now give the floor to Carmen Cordova. She's from Peru, and she's the financial officer of the AYNI LFS call. She will give us a brief information about the finances regarding this call. Mr. Carmen, you can take the floor.
Thank you, Adija, for the presentation. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you. My name is Carmen Cordova. I am part of the AYNI fund team in the LFS program, and I am in charge of the program's administration and finances. We are going to talk about the general guidelines for the budget. The budget is a very important part of the proposal. Regarding its elaboration, you have to take into account that it must be reflected in monetary terms each one of the activities proposed for the implementation of the project presented. The budget needs to be made and presented in American dollars. It must be elaborated according to the logic framework and detailed by objectives and types of expenses related to each activity. In order to determine the total budget, you must consider the grant's size according to the categories of the goal. When making the budget, the established percentage need to be followed, for example, for the operating cost section. Be aware that in order to elaborate the budget, you need to have the updated cost, for example, of materials, fees, taxes, accommodations, staff costs, etc., within the locality and country that the project will be implemented. In this way, you will avoid that the activities result overpriced or underpriced. Another relevant aspect are the contributions that might be included in the budget, but that are not part of the grant that is being requested to the AYNI fund. These contributions can be monetary, if they are to complement the AYNI's fund contribution, indicating the source of the co-investment. Non-monetary, the in-kind contributions needs to be quantified, such as local services of food, lodging, and materials, or some equipment that belong to the organization and can be used for the project. The AYNI Fund considers fundamental the contribution of Indigenous women in their own communities, such as spiritual support, interpretation in Indigenous language, and community promotion work. These contributions have a value that can be quantified and reflected as a non-monetary contribution in the corresponding line in the budget. Finally, the budget format and the elaboration guide will be sent to the organizations selected and invited to develop the full proposal. In the same way, accompaniment will be provided in order to solve any doubts and questions that may come up during the process. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sister Carmen, for giving us the insight into all the financial aspects that we need to know concerning this call. I will now open the floor for question and answer, and I will lead you on how we are going to go through this process, as we want the participants to interact with us, ask their questions to the presenters, so we can have clarification on the call. First, we have two options. You can send your question through the chat, or you can use the raise hand button, and then I will call you to ask your questions. And you can also direct your question if it's to Sheila or to Margarita or to Carmen. So I'm opening the floor for questions.
So Manny have her hand raised. Please, Manny.
Mrs. Yang, please, can you go ahead?
Sorry, it's me. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. For me, I am the interpreter, but Ms. Raymond, she have a question. So are you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mane.
Okay, thanks. So she would like to ask the first question is related to example like the Cambodian Indigenous Women Association. It's in the process of register, but it's yet got the legal entity from the Ministry of Interior, or we can say they not yet get the official register from the government yet. So they are now using the system from CIPO, Cambodian Indigenous People Organization. So they need to have the agreement from CIPO, right, before they can submit it, the proposal. Is it right? And the second question related to that, is it possible if CIPO also can be submitted the proposal, in the same time with the SIVA? Because CIPO is an official organization that already registered, and SIVA it's not yet, but just only use the finance and admin system only. But is it possible if both organizations submit a separate proposal to FIMI? And the third is related to the grant, the large grants. You mentioned about the regional, the scope is for the regional and sub-regional coverage. It mean like for in Bangkok, something like that, I cover a number of few countries, right? Yes, so that's all the question from Cambodia. Thank you.
And before we answer the questions, I would like to take all the questions and send your question to the person who you want to answer, so we can proceed to the answers after all the questions have been posed, because we have just less than 10 minutes round up this session. So the next hand I can see Rashmila. Can you please ask your question? Rashmila, can you unmute?
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for this wonderful, informative webinar. I am Rashmila Prajapati from Nepal, and I belong to Indigenous community in Newar. I am involved with two organizations. One is Indigenous Women's Newar's organization, and one is Indigenous organization, which are working for Indigenous people. So my question is, can the two organizations apply separately? Because I am involved in both of them. So both of organizations are eligible to apply individually or not? Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmila. I will now give the floor to Vidya. Vidya, go ahead.
Jujalapa, I'm Vidya Srastha from Newa Nation. My question is, but first of all, first and foremost, thank you, Fimi, for such a wonderful opportunity and information that really help, Indigenous women to enhance and empower. Well, my question is like, we have been fighting with government. The reason is that like Newa Indigenous lands, especially inside the Kathmandu Valley, government has, came out with development aggression, and we lost the land, and we are fighting for land, territory, and resources, the human rights as well as the women rights. And my organization, we established it from 7 years, but we are not legally registered. The reason is that once you are legally registered, there are a lot of problems, legal problems, so that we cannot go for protests, we cannot organize, movements, and our motive is just to give equal justice for, over land, territory, and resources to women, Indigenous peoples, Newa people. And so how it is possible? Because once we register legally, we want to be operating, or we want to be, functioning. We cannot go and participate in protest, but our motive is to, enhance and strengthen Newa women, including, to fight for injustice, illegal road expansion, which is happening in Kathmandu Valley. Not only that, Khokna and Bungamati, there are 7 development aggression projects that totally demolish houses of Newa people. At the same time, land encroachment, we call it a culture genocide as well. So how it is possible to make, since we are not registered? Thank you so much.
Please remember to keep your questions very short due to time constraint. I will take the 2 hands and then I'll give the floor to the presenters to answer. The next one is Sangarika.
My name is Sagarika Vikramasekara. I'm representing Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, we have an indigenous community called Vadda. So in that community, no women are coming out. Like they are not aware of this kind of activity, so they are not raising their voices. So somehow we have to make them aware that. But there are no such projects initiated in Sri Lanka. So I'm working for one of the women-led organizations. Can we develop a proposal on behalf of them and like drag in those indigenous community women into that? Because at the moment, there are no such organizations in Sri Lanka.
The next person is Melody, and then after that, we can give an answer. Melody? Please unmute.
Oh, sorry. It was a mistake that I raised my hand.
Okay. I will give the hand to Virginia. That will be the last hand before we answer the question. Virginia, can you ask your question?
Hello. Hello.
Go ahead,
yeah, can
please.
you? Yeah. I'm Virginia PIS from the Philippines, represented by King Global Minds Development. And this organization, I'm the CEO, president of this organization. And most of the one who's working on it are all women. And we have this program for these single mothers and for the indigenous people. I myself also is an indigenous person. So we have this program. I just want to ask if can our program can give a proposal or request for FEMI, or can we join on the program that you've been asking? Because I've been looking for the grants that we've been doing these programs for these indigenous people here in the Philippines.
Thank you, Virginia. I will now give the floor
You're
to
very much welcome.
Sushila or Margarita. Please, let's be brief because we don't have a lot of time to answer.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, sisters, for very interesting questions. I think some of the things we will be reiterating again is maybe I will not go one by one, but I will answer, cover all the questions together. So, which is kind of overlapping, that's why. Especially when we are talking about the registration, which is what Siramom and Bidajit just mentioned. As I presented earlier, like there are two ways that we can, I will say, submit. One is if the organization is legally registered, then they can directly apply. But of course, we understand there are many other challenges, or sometimes we are in the process, as SIVA is in the process of, in the process of registration. So in this case, we request our Indigenous Women Network to find the physical host who have the legal registration and has the bank account if your proposals are selected, so that we can, the project will go to our Indigenous women's organization, but through the physical host. So there is the provision of having physical host if your organization is not registered due to different circumstances or in the process of registration. That is one. Second is, like, there are three questions regarding whether the other organization who is working for Indigenous women can apply. It is to, maybe I missed somewhere the Virginia's, statement. Please add if it is, if I missed your point. This is to Virginia and Sangrarika, and Ceramon on the SIPO, or or Mane on whether the SIPO or Vidya or the King mining organization can apply. As we mentioned, like, Indigenous women's access is very, very less. If we disaggregate the resource access to our organization is very less. That's why this is very much targeted to Indigenous women's organization or Indigenous women-led organizations. As I mentioned, therefore, we request you to reach out to the communities, and I don't know, even if it is grassroots organization, we have provision of institutional strengthening, so they can apply for these resources. I think the next question.
Can you please round up?
Huh?
Please, can you round up? Time.
I will say, so third one is, regarding the organization which is Indigenous people, but if the leadership there, especially 50% of Indigenous women are there in leadership position and executive as a staff, they can apply for this one, this call. And maybe one organization cannot apply twice, mentioned earlier, and especially the large grant is intended for the regional organization which will have multi-country coverage. It also depends upon the capacity, institutional capacity of the organization to manage the fund. Yeah, I think that is all for now. Thank you. Next. please.
Thank you,
Maybe,
Sushila.
maybe I just add,
Okay.
Sushila, that for the large grants, it could be a regional network, but you can also have various organizations getting together to submit a proposal in a consortium. So if 2-3 organizations think that they can work together and that they can come up with a proposal for a large grant, this is an option that you can also use for coming further.
Yeah, thank you, Margarita,
for that information. Please, let's take note that the date for submission is on the 21st of July, so make sure you send in your application for that deadline. I think we are above the time now. I will close the session. Thank you all of you for participating in this webinar and for the questions and for the panelists. Thank you for presenting and giving us insight about everything that we need to know about the call. I'm calling on all the participants to send their questions to lfs.ayni at iiwf.org for all questions related to this call. So thank you very much. Thank you, our technical team, the panelists, and everyone who is participating. We are looking forward to your applications and looking forward to having you again in our next webinar. Thank you.
Before closing, can I have one quick comment, Adija? Sorry. I see a few questions in the chat box. Also, like, few in question answer. I think Margarita is handling the question answer box, but there are few in the chat box. Though due to time limitation, we are closing the program right here, but we will be writing the response to your questions through emails. You will get the response. Thank you for having patience. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm closing this session.